And by request, I sifted through Ravnica today. This is all my cards from Ravnica block. Well, that aren't decks, which aren't too many either. See, the thing with Ravnica block is it came out the pre-release was in late September of 05. I joined the army in mid-November of 05. So, plus at the time I was working on weekends, so I didn't get the chance to hit the FLGS and pick up cards and whatnot. I didn't get a lot of Ravnica, which was a shame because I loved Ravnica block. I really did. But I have a lot of Ravnica in Magic Online. Oh, let me tell you something. 6, almost 7 months in training in the Army after I got out of basic. I spent a lot of time on Magic Online. Oh, jeez. Because, quite bluntly put, it was something to do. It was one of my hobbies from home, and I didn't have my cards with me. I actually did end up buying some cards while I was in Texas in training. There was one other guy that I frequently played cards with, a fellow by the last name of Caperton. Good guy, but weird as all hell. I mean, weirder than me. And if you knew how weird I am, you'd sit there and go, that's not possible. Trust me, it is. So, yeah. Oh boy. So Ravnica block. I've got some interesting stuff in there, but nothing too exciting. I mean, I don't have any Shocklands in there. I have 4 or 5 Shocklands in Magic Online. I might have one Shockland in a red-white control burn deck, but that deck needs to be redone because they changed the errata on Winter Orb. They removed the errata that makes Winter Orb function the way it did under pre-6th edition rules. That did not make me happy, which means I'm going to have to eventually fix that deck, probably see if I can't hunt up some static orbs and replace my Winter Orbs. Oh, that irks me to no end. I even sent a rather angry email to Wizard of the Coast about it, but I put some humorous phrasing in it, and I got an email back from the fellow who apparently was in charge of this decision, and he said that it was the most amusing email he's ever gotten. So I guess it's kind of a compliment, I guess. I'm calmer about it than I was at the time. Oh, I went into nerd rage mode. I don't like getting that way. I'm not normally one to nerd rage either. I mean, I knew it was irrational. I mean, completely irrational. But that... I mean, at this point I'm still upset, but I know it's irrational. I can handle it a little bit better right now, but Anyway, Ravnica. Talking about that. I find it really, really kind of amusing that probably the weakest guild mechanic in Ravnica belonged to what is probably the strongest guild in Ravnica. The Boros had Radiance. And Radiance was a mechanic that people tried to avoid because it really wasn't a good mechanic. It, as often as not, would end up biting you in the rear. Basically, any ability or spell with Radiance said that it affected not only the target creature, but every creature that shared a color with it. So, yeah, that tended to be kind of bad at times. But which is kind of fun though, because the Boros Legion was a really aggressive faction in the game. So you could make Boros decks that just exploded out of the gate and pounded face. And they were awesome like that. I mean, you had 3 drops that were you had a 3-drop that was a 2/2 flying haste. You had lightning helix, red and a white for an instant that was 3 damage to a target and gained 3 life. The life gain was nice, but it really wasn't necessary. Considering at that point in time, don't even, if I recall correctly, Incinerate wasn't even in print at the time. So getting a 2 casting cost spell that would do 3 damage at instant speed at the time was considered pretty nice. So there you go, But, yeah. The Golgari's delve mechanic was stupid good. As I understand it, people playing older formats where delve cards are legal can kill really fast with delve decks. Basically, a card with delve is one that says if it's in your graveyard and you would draw a card, skip drawing a card, put the top X cards of your deck into your graveyard and pull this from your grave and put it in your hand. By and large, I think delve just worked really. I mean, I'm not like super into tournament or anything, at least not constructed. But I can tell you right now, I'd gladly use that reanimator. So gladly. Then there was stuff like, what else? That was the Dimir had Transmute, which was an interesting mechanic. Basically, a card had a Transmute cost, which was generally the same or comparable to its mana cost. And what a card with Transmute did is when you transmuted it, which if I recall correctly was played as a sorcery, you discarded the card and searched your deck for a card with the same converted mana cost, reveal, put it in hand. The last time Transmute got used at all was in Future Sight for Teleria West. I want to say that was in Future Sight. It was somewhere in Time Spiral block. And I like Teleria West. It's like, yeah, I can pay a colorless, and if I draw it like later mid-game when I don't need the land, I can say, hey, colorless, 2 blue, pitch it, I search for a land, a 0-cost artifact, something. That's not bad. I like it. Jeez, what else did we have? The Celestia had Convoke. Card with Convoke basically said you could tap a creature, and when you cast it, to reduce its casting cost by an amount of colorless mana, or by an amount of mana by one. I can speak English, I really can. When you cast a Convoke spell, you can tap creatures. Each creature you tap reduces the casting cost by either 1 generic mana or 1 mana of a color that the creature you tapped has. So, for example, if you had a card that was 6 colors, a white and a green, you could tap 8 creatures, and so long as one of those creatures was green and one of those creatures was white, you effectively played that for free, which is nice. I mean, especially considering that a lot of the Celestia cards were Saproling token generators. That was also nice. Then we got into Guild Pact, which the Izzet were a fun faction. The Replicate spells, some of them were fun, really nice. I liked Train of Thought. That was a nice card. Basically, when you played a spell with Replicate, you could pay the Replicate cost as many times as you want. And for each time you paid it, you put a copy of the spell on the stack. That made it really hard to counter some of these things, because if you countered the spell itself, the Replicate trigger still went off. So, yeah, I've got a bunch of copies on there. It's basically a fixed version of Storm. And Storm was a redonkulously stupid powerful mechanic. The only time outside of I'm trying to remember what block was Storm in. Is it Onslaught block they had Storm in? I want to say it was Onslaught block. But yeah, the only time outside of that block where you saw Storm was on like 1, maybe 2 cards in Time Spiral, and they were very high casting costed cards to try and. Yeah, there was like 2 cards in Time Spiral, I want to say, that had Storm, and they were relatively high casting cost for what they did. The idea being is they want to make it harder for you to cast these cards, because they found out that Storm is stupid good. Ah, jeez. Basically, a Storm deck would do nothing for, pretty much nothing for 2 or 3 turns, and then it would cast like a whole crap ton of spells, and at that point it would then it would play, basically just play one of its win condition spells. It would either deal a crap ton of damage to you, or mill your library away, or cause you to lose a bunch of life. And it was nasty and mean and vile and not friendly. But anyway, back to Guild Pack. So we had the Is It with Replicate, which was fun. We had the Orzhov, who had the Haunt mechanic. It was an interesting mechanic, but it created too many rules questions. So it's never come back at all. And we had the Gruul, whose mechanic was, I believe it was Bloodlust or Bloodthirst or something like that. Basically is a creature with this, it was a mechanic name, Bloodlust, Bloodthirst, whatever, well, I think it was Bloodthirst, and a number. And when the creature came into play, if the opponent had already been dealt damage this turn, it came in with X amount of +1/+1 counters, where X was the Bloodthirst number. So it was kind of interesting. I don't think it was a particularly flexible mechanic. Oh well. But the Gruul were a fun faction, especially with cards like Rumbling Slum and stuff like that. Then in Dissension, the last part of Ravnica, you had the Rakdos with Hellbent. Hellbent was an interesting mechanic. I liked it. Basically, a card or a spell with Hellbent had some kind of additional effect or augmentation when you had no cards in hand. It was part of the Red-Black Guild. It's a very red mechanic, and I like it. Just like Delve was a very black mechanic, and Transmute was a very blue mechanic. Delve was in green-black, and Transmute was in blue-black. Dissension, we had the Rakdos, the Azorius, who had Forecast, which was an interesting ability. Basically, a spell with Forecast, you during your upkeep, you pay token mana cost and reveal the card, and you got a effect that was somehow related to the card. For instance, if your card was like a big flyer or something, your Forecast ability would either give a creature like would be something along the lines of giving the creature target creature flying till end of turn, or putting a 1/1 flying bird token into play, or something like that. Or you'd have a Forecast ability that would give a creature like +1/+1 till end of turn. Forecast made a brief reappearance in Time Spiral block, where there was a card with Forecast that gave a creature Shadow until end of turn. If you don't know what Shadow is, it was originally from Tempest block. Basically, Shadow created another plane of combat in a way. Creatures with Shadow could only block or be blocked by creatures with Shadow. It was kind of like flying in a way, much like Horsemanship from Portal 3 Kingdoms. Actually, it's pretty much the same as Horsemanship from Portal 3 Kingdoms. The difference between Horsemanship and Shadow and flying is, number one, the name on the card, and number two, the fact that there were only like 2 creatures that didn't have Shadow that could block Shadow. No creatures that, well, I want to say no creatures that didn't have Horsemanship that could block Horsemanship, but I'm not 100% certain on that. And there's a bunch of creatures that don't have flying that can block flyers, most of them green. Though I know there's at least one that's red and at least one that's white. Back to Dissension. Forecast. So we who was the other guild? Dissension. There was Azorius, the Rakdos. The Simic, the Blue-Green Guild. Their mechanic was the graft. Would be graft number. When a creature with graft comes into play, it gets that number of +1/+1 counters put on it, and whenever another creature came into play, you could move a +1/+1 counter off of that creature onto the creature that just came into play. This was interesting, especially seeing how there were a lot of graft creatures that had a secondary ability that was like pump some mana into him, and target creature with a +1/+1 counter gets fill in the blank ability. It could be flying or regenerated or it can shroud for the turn, something like that, As far as the abilities from Ravnica block coming back, I'm not sure if Delve has made a comeback. I know Transmute has. I know Hellbent has. I know Forecast has. I don't think any of the others really have. Oh well. So yeah, I just babbled a lot about Ravnica block. It was a great block, but I didn't get much of it. At least not in physical cards. That does really disappoint me. But it is what it is. It's life. It's one of the reasons why I had to trade. Well, I didn't have to, but I mentioned it in one of the threads on the message boards on Wizards, and that I was looking for Firemane Angels, and someone by the name of Green Meanie, I believe the fellow lives out in Ohio. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. He offered to trade me some Firemane Angels. So he hunted some from his friends, and he wanted some older cards from me. Mostly older cards, a lot of them commons, really, and he was dealt with me pretty fair and square, so I can't complain about that. He felt kind of guilty because he was getting more cards off of me, but than I was getting from him. I was only getting $3 dollar rares at best, and he was getting a crap ton of cards, some mostly out of print commons, like I said, some a few brainstorms and some black card zombie creature thing that was, to be perfectly blunt, it's a card that's really overcosted, but it's good in multiplayer because it made multiple opponents pitch cards instead of target player or target opponent. But so I'm guessing he plays a lot of multiplayer, maybe, but that's alright. Like I said, he dealt pretty square with me, and so if he contacts you trying to trade you stuff, I can tell you I've had a good experience with him. Anyways, wrap this up. Talk to you guys another day. Oh, hey, I'm gonna have to charge the battery on this thing too. It's getting low. Alright. Be good, fellas. Stay safe, etc., etc.